The best evidence against Jewish space lasers turns out to be Marjorie Taylor Greene. If I were in control of the space lasers, she would be the first person I burned off the face of the planet. Okay, second. Make America great again. Again. When was America ever greater than she is now? It's a weird slogan. And when the Trump team started banding that around in 2015, all of the social scientists' butts puckered. We've seen this shit before. Make Germany great again. What we're talking about is humiliation. The fascists have to appeal to a humiliated middle class. And man, we have one. We have one here. America is humiliated in so many ways. First of all, we have to clarify what we mean by America. I mean the America where we spell America with a K. There are really 11 or 13 fairly distinct population regions in the United States. And we have pretty different ideas, values, economies, preferences, language variants. And in some of these populations, we feel like America was better before black people had rights, ultimately. So the 1950s, we keep calling back to the 1950s. What was going on in the 50s that was so great? Well, not much. Leave It to Beaver would have you believe that we had perfect families. There was mother and father, toilets didn't exist. Leave It to Beaver was the first TV show to feature a toilet in it, and it's because, if memory serves, Beaver was flushing something down it that was inappropriate. Mother and father slept in different beds. A weird thing about the 50s, if you're watching TV and movies, men sleep in bed together, men and women sleep in bed apart. Showing a marital bed on TV, the censors I would be scandalized. Now it's commonplace. In the 50s, we were modest. Yeah, we were modest to a fault and well beyond. But everything wasn't perfect. What had happened is World War II wrapped up, and America had this tremendous production capacity. We had built factories every 15 feet to make bombs and guns, weapons of war, planes, tanks, armored vehicles, sundries, belts, uniforms. And at the end of the war, all of that production turned to just making mundane goods for Americans. Soldiers came home with their GI Bill money to spend and went to college and became experts on things. Tract housing sprang up all across the country. Affordable tract housing. There was a chicken in every pot and at least one car in every driveway for white people. Black people were kept out of that prosperity. Black men came home from war to fucking segregation. They were not permitted to buy houses in these clean new neighborhoods. By the 70s, they were loaned money exclusively to buy houses in failing neighborhoods, and these become the urban blight of the late 20th century. What we forget when we harken back to the 1950s is people weren't happy in this arrangement. The care of extended family members was outsourced to professionals, because we had Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and we could afford to do that. But it meant we were isolated from our aunts and uncles and grandparents. We forget that women worked exceedingly long hours in the home, that they were expected to be sexy and sexually available all the time, as well as a housefrau, a house-proud housefrau, with everything perfect at home and the children perfectly cared for. We forget mommy's little helper, that women would pop a Valium at the end of their day to just cope. And we forget that this apparent middle-class prosperity left out poor people, it left out people of color. Black people in particular had little or no access to this kind of lifestyle. They were banned from the neighborhoods where it was taking place, and banned from the sorts of jobs that would enable it. So the 1950s, this period that we refer to as traditional family values, it only existed for 4 or 5 years in the post-war era. It never happened before on the face of the earth, and I'd be surprised if it ever happens again. Have we lost something? When we're saying make America great again, what is it that we've lost? Have we lost the heteronormative values of leave it to beaver? We never really had those. We never really had those values. We had television censorship. Is that what makes America great? We've lost miscegenation laws that prevent black and white people from marrying. We've lost redlining. Is that what made America great? Is keeping people apart? Is segregation what made America great? When you listen to the Goldwater-esque rhetoric of the modern Republican Party, you just sort of have to believe that's what they believe. You sort of have to believe that's the case. What they think what made America great was segregation and traditional gender norms. In my psychology classes, I try to open with some pretty hardcore epistemology. You know, the first week is the philosophy of science, and I try and cram 2 years of science philosophy into a couple of lessons. The first thing that we have to learn about is the Dunning-Kruger effect. See that in previous videos. And we have to learn the concept of humility without humiliation. If I'm walking through the hallways and I see someone with a t-shirt that says beautiful, the first thing I know about them is that they are not beautiful. Beautiful people don't have to tell you that they are beautiful. A more impressive t-shirt might be, why are my looks so important to you? But everybody's not equally beautiful. That's unduly democratizing this fairly objective thing that's about us, actually. And when I see someone with a t-shirt that says, I am powerful, well, the one thing I know about them really is that they're not powerful. When we start to study the philosophy of science, what we learn is that definite knowledge is impossible, or at the very least extremely difficult. And we start to learn that our confidence in ourselves is really very overstated. At the top of that U-shaped curve, we have a lot of unearned confidence and not much competence. In the sciences, certainly, we need to be humble. We need to reflect on all of the things that we don't know and that perhaps we can't know. An artist, too, is going to get partway through their educational experiences or their training. They're going to look back at the work they did 2 or 3 or 5 years ago and cringe. It's humiliating. It doesn't have to be. We can just acknowledge that we didn't know very much back then. We didn't know very much back then. The modern age is all about humiliation for some people. We look back at American history. Wow, the way that your grandparents were taught history in high school, it's very different from the way we look at history in modernity. You know, the idea, God, that first Thanksgiving, the pageant that happens in kiddie school, right? The idea that Squanto meets the settlers and is friendly, and they get together and have a big Thanksgiving, and there's turkey and fixins and all of that stuff. Very, very unrealistic. You know, Squanto was starving because disease brought from Europe had killed 90% of the people on the eastern seaboard. And when those pilgrims arrived and found just open tracts of farmland, they said, God has provided this for us. But actually, the natives provided that for themselves, but then died when the first explorers brought smallpox and so forth. And that's true. That's true. But if you're white in America and you're a certain age and you learned about the first goddamn Thanksgiving like it was true, nobody ever bothered to disabuse you of that notion in school, then that's humiliating. Yeah. To be told that your ancestors were not conquerors but fascist genociders, that's humiliating. To be told that Christopher Columbus was not the hero that you grew up learning of. You know, he didn't discover the New World. He was looking for India, stumbled across the Caribbean islands, enacted a genocide against the people that he found there, raped and tortured and enslaved people, forced the women and some of the children into prostitution, gave them syphilis and sold them in Spain and Italy. That's humiliating. It's humiliating. What is all this shit about critical race theory? Oh my God, critical race theory is not in schools. What conservatives know is at least the leadership who have college degrees and tell you not to go to college. What the conservative leadership knows is that if we start talking about race, it's going to be humiliating for white people, for a certain class of somewhat older white people who went to school and learned this sort of jingoistic, rah-rah nationalism version of America where America was great. America hasn't changed. How we understand ourselves has changed. It's changed over decades as we research, as we let different voices come to the table and tell their stories, as we get into source material. The story of America, the way that we tell the story of America has changed. There's increasing representation for Black, Indigenous, and people of color on film, in television, in radio, in news, in broadcasting. There's increasing representation and positive representation of GLBTQIA plus people in those same spheres. And so if you grew up in the 50s when everything seemed so perfect because everybody fucking told you it was. If you grew up in this time, modernity is humiliating. Yeah. What the progressives and what the liberals and what the people with PhDs are saying is that life was a lie. It was an illusion. America was never great. But they made you stand up and salute the flag every morning in school. and pray to the flag. Your identity is built around the greatness of America, which is not now great and has never been great. It's humiliating. It's absolutely humiliating. And what do you do with humiliation? Do you sit the humiliated person down and hug them close and pat them on the head and say, there, it's going to be okay? We all fall down sometimes. Nah, man, these people grew up with Dr. Spock. Not Mr. Spock from Star Trek, Dr. Spock, the child rearing expert who advocated leaving children in their rooms to cry through their own distress until they worked it out. Nah, they do not take well to being hugged close and told, there, it'll be all right, we all fall down sometimes. No, you ignore it. That's what that generation did when they were raped, when they were sodomized by their funny uncle, when they were beat up on the playground. There was no sympathy for anybody. And so you just suck it up. You smile, you get through your day, you take a Valium at night so you can sleep through the pain. And that's what the right wing wants to do right now. The right wing wants to pretend there is no climate change. Just ignore it. It'll go away. Just smile. They want to pretend that we don't have a history of genocide. Land snatches, genocide, race slavery. Nope, just ignore it. It makes us feel bad. Just ignore it. They want to pretend there's no COVID. Because if there was COVID and the president had dismantled the mechanisms we'd put in place to handle pandemics, and 750,000 people died as a result, that would be humiliating. And so you just look away. Just look away and eat your Valium. Who's hardest hit by the opioid epidemic? Opioid epidemic, like you can catch opioids somehow. Who's hardest hit by that? The report delivered from the car, because there's literally no other quiet place in my life where I can talk to you. So here we are out driving the hearse, talking about fascism. Where were we? Humiliation. Donald Trump. Jesus Christ. Oh, wow. Something really happened. The Bush years were totally absurd. George Bush Jr. was such a butt for comedy. He was, God, I'm going to say it. He was so stupid. He appeared so stupid. Look, George Bush II, the W, was not a stupid man. You don't get to be stupid and be the president of the United States. He was interpersonally very charming. He was quite intelligent. He can hold a conversation on almost any topic you care to name. But he talks like an idiot because he's appealing to the lumpen masses, right? These guys are styled to talk to uneducated white senior citizens and uneducated white men. To do that, you have to talk at a lower grade level. You get a Trump speech and you throw it through a grade level analyzer like a written doc. He's talking at the 4th grade reading level. Like if you wrote down the stuff Trump says, it comes back the 4th grade reading level. Bush was no better than 6th. And he just comes across so stupid. The comedians ate him alive. Right? During the Bush era, we have the rise of apparently liberal comics. We have the Jon Stewart just skewering every day, skewering the lies and the inconsistencies of especially Fox News, but the media in general. And it's humiliating. It's humiliating. People believe stupid things, and Jon Stewart calls them out every night at 9 on the television. Then we get Stephen Colbert. Wow. His parody of a right-wing media figure. It's absolutely spot on. It nails it. Absolutely nails it. And it's completely degrading. Like, if you vote conservative, watching Jon Stewart and especially watching Stephen Colbert every night, it's like a direct slap in the face. It's gross. It's gross. These are the most popular media figures and political commentators, the most trusted of their time. Jon Stewart shockingly finds himself like the second most trusted man in the political media sphere. Yeah, that's just what happened, and it's gross. It's gross. So through the Barack Obama years, just the humiliation of right-wing conservative thought, it drives independent thinkers away from the movement and makes it so that, look, the Dunning-Kruger thing, conservatism is wrong on every front. At this point, everything that a conservative would want to propose about America is false. Every policy that they want to propose turns out to be misguided, ineffective, mean-spirited, just lies. They're lying liars who lie. All politicians lie. No, for these guys, lying is a political strategy. It's their lifeblood. So if you believe conservative stuff and you're watching, really believe it, if you're the lumpen masses watching Colbert and Jon Stewart getting slapped in the face, there's no difference between the true stuff that a really good media critic like Jon Stewart can say. There's no difference between that and saying that the news are all liars. Unless they believe conservative things, they are the liars. They're the enemies of the people. They are fake news. The real fake news is the stuff that criticizes the right? So most people, most human beings can tell the difference between the left's use of fake news, that is, you're just making things up to drag elderly white seniors in, and fake news means criticism. Most people can tell the difference between those things, but some people can't. Some people can't. They don't know enough to tell the difference. So that's the big difference between the Trump years, the fascist years, and the Bush years and conservatism under Barack Obama. Conservatism changed under Obama. His first term, Mitch McConnell was willing to bring things to the floor. Mitch McConnell was willing to give Obama-era appointees a hearing at least, and then an up or down vote. And it was really after conservatives won majorities in the House and the Senate that stopped happening. So, Donald J. Trump. Let's talk about this guy. When his campaign really got started in 2015, we had all these political commentators and comedians looking at the guy as just a total gift. Whose line was this? He's running as a Republican. I thought he was running as a joke. Some comedian said that. I'll look it up later and get it linked here somehow. Jon Stewart, he made the decision to leave The Daily Show And he talks about Trump being this absolute gift, right? That on my way out, at least I don't have to work very hard because Trump is going to provide us with comedy gold every day. All of the news switches to Trump, all of the comedians switch to Trump. All we can talk about is Donald fucking Trump. Here's the thing. In the Bush years, the left made fun of the right and pointed at Bush, and Bush Jr. was capable of shame, right? Part of how we get here is the shaming of the right for their sort of outre and cruel and insane and inconsistent ideologies. But Trump comes along, and Trump is about pride. Trump is about pride. The man does not seem to experience any shame. I'm not about diagnosing at a distance. I'm not willing to go all the way and say psychopath, but on that characteristic, this seems to be a pretty psychopathic trait. He doesn't seem to feel shame. He doesn't care what haters think about him. He literally doesn't. It's not a pose. Doesn't seem to be a pose. So how do you make fun of a guy like that? He shows up with his weird orange spray tan, right? And with his weird golden comb over. Wow. So bizarre. How do you even begin to make fun of a dude who clearly doesn't care? How do you make fun of the ill-fitting suit? How do you make fun of the legion of quacks and weirdos and extremists and bullshit people he surrounds himself with? You know, reality TV stars and the insanity of it. They clearly don't care what you say about them. And then when you make fun of them, it just deepens the idea that Fox News is the only news. Fake news is the stuff that makes fun of us. They're just cruel. They're just haters. They hate us for our success. Gay pride is a thing. It's a thing. I don't know if you've been to New York. In my state, we have in our capital city, we have this gigantic GLBTQ pride parade once a year. It's amazing. I was lucky enough to march in that parade. A political organization here advocating for same-sex rights. They let me march in the parade, and I got to carry the trans flag, and it was amazing to be on the inside. There were thousands of people lining the parade route. So much support and love being poured on people who are often used as political footballs and rejected by their own families and rejected by church. I'm not in particular on the GLBT spectrum. I'm pretty well cishet. I'd say I'm about 5% neuroqueer. But this pride is, it's a curative. It's a curative for being non-heteroconforming in a hetero-demanding society. So, straight people sometimes look at a gay pride parade and it seems somewhere between silly and offensive to them. And they go, well, what if I had a straight pride parade, you know? Nobody would come to that. And people try it sometimes, and indeed nobody comes. What they don't understand is that straight people don't need pride. Because straight people aren't used as a goddamn political football every day. Straight people aren't being told that because of their straight identity, their straight sexual orientation, they're somehow inferior and deserve to be abused, punished, used as a dividing line, used as a scare tactic. And GLBTQ folks, that whole spectrum of folks, do experience that kind of abuse and that kind of misuse. So pride is a curative for a society that tells you to feel ashamed. Well, guess what happened? During the Bush years and during the Obama years, conservatives were effectively, publicly, and deservedly shamed for believing just outrageous, cruel bullshit. That's what happened. So then Trump comes along and says, I am your freak flag, baby. Let's fly. And so you get this this conservative pride movement. You know, America's like this, and let's be proud of it. Let's be proud of the hate. Let's be proud of the fear of immigrants. Let's be proud of the nationalism, the xenophobia. Let's be proud of the lies. That's fascist. That's fascist. When the people who have no reason to be ashamed are shamed, and the people who should be ashamed stop experiencing shame, that's fucking fascism. Eco's writing about a frustrated middle class. This has a couple of dimensions. It should seem pretty clear by now that America's middle class is white. And America's frustrated, humiliated middle class, who feels threatened by the class mobility of the people underneath, is white. It's very easy to confuse middle class white people about the source of their problems. This is as old as time. There's the old comic with the union, there's this old comic with the corporate boss, and he has a pile of money in front of him. And then there's a worker with $1, and there's a union guy with $1. And the corporate boss points at the union guy and he says, better watch out, worker. That union guy is trying to get your $1. It's so easy. Heather McGhee's book, The Sum of Us, really does a great job diving into racial class politics in the United States. Into racial class politics in the United States. Even things like union votes and modernity hinge on the union busters' ability to show union voters black people who might be in their union if they vote yes. That's enough to take down a basic unionization effort. That should be very clear by now. The anti-immigrant movement is about those poor people, those dirty, inhuman cockroaches from other places on Earth coming and taking our jobs. And none of that holds up to scrutiny. But this is the feeling on the right. Informally, we call this the cutting in line problem. America's wages have stagnated forever. With the rise of activist stockbrokers as access to the stock market gets put on the internet in the early 2000s. Activist day traders just don't buy stock in companies that do anything for workers. Walmart couldn't raise wages if they wanted to. Their market cap would collapse overnight. With the activist market, with the right-wing activist market going on, the middle class has taken hit after hit after hit. Our spending power has not appreciably increased in 30 or 40 years. We have families with 2 parents working out there in the job market, working 50 or 60 hours a week each, to have ultimately less spending power than their granddad had in the 1950s. And then this middle class, they can see what's happening to them. We can see what's happening to us. We can see that we have to go to college to get our own job training. We can see that the banks have weaponized that against us. Uh, I have $180,000 in student loan debt that I have no capacity to repay in my lifetime. I'm always on the hook for this. The banks are always taking a percentage off of me forever, for the rest of my life. We can see this happening to us. But it's just so easy to sell people this story that it's Mexicans or the Chinese who are robbing us of our prosperity, instead of the big bankers at the top who ultimately decide who gets to run for president. We've never had a free and fair election in this country. We never have had a free and fair election. The last one, the 2021, was the freest, fairest election in American history. But it wasn't free or fair. We've always had conditions around who's able to vote. In the beginning, it was landed men. And then eventually, women were permitted to vote, and black people were permitted to vote by law, but not in fact. We've never had a free or fair election. By the 19th century, gerrymandering made it so that if you can control the state houses and the governor's office, you can pick who votes for you. So that in states like North Carolina, it's basically a 50-50 state, and yet 75% of their delegates to the U.S. House of Representatives are Republicans, and 90% of their delegates to their own state house are Republicans. They just drew the lines that way, so mathematically that's what happens. Well, when the rich people have all the power to decide who gets to vote, whose vote counts, and even what information you receive, it's easy to get people enough people anyway, to buy onto the racist idea that black people and Mexicans and the Chinese are taking our jobs. So that's the humiliated middle class. And in America, you just can't tease race and class completely apart. When you're talking about race and someone says, I think we should be talking about class, what they mean is they don't want to talk about race. Remember the Henry Louis Gates incident. Henry Louis Gates, a college professor, has a TV show, probably is a millionaire, I don't know. And Harvard? Boston? Look that one up later. He's getting home from an international trip, and his driver drops him off in his nice upscale, Harvard professorish sort of neighborhood, and he can't find his keys. Now he's exhausted. I have done that return flight from China. It's like 20 hours and 3 different planes, and it is absolutely exhausting. Never mind the change from night to day and all of the work you've been doing and fun you've been having overseas. Getting home, by the time you're home, you just want to lay down and die. So Professor Gates can't find his keys, but it's his house, and so he breaks a window, unlocks the door, and lets himself in. And the neighbors see a black man breaking into a house. They call the cops. Cops show up, and Professor Gates, absolutely exhausted and fully aware of the implications of being black in America and having the cops called on you, he's pretty irascible. So the police are trying to get him to prove that he lives in the place, and he's not super cooperative, but he eventually shows ID in a piece of mail or something, I don't remember, and he proves it's his house. And then he is very rude. He's very rude to those police officers. Does he have the right to be? Yeah, this is America, man. Do you have free speech or don't you have free speech? Well, they arrest him. They arrest him for disturbing the peace in his own house, in his own house. Uh, yeah, this doesn't disprove that race and class are separate, but it absolutely is suggestive because we have thousands of these kinds of stories every day all across America. Um, that middle class is largely contingent on being white, and people of other races who are middle class with a wink. As long as you don't upset anybody, because the middle class white people are perfectly willing to weaponize the police against you, right? If class and race were really separate constructs, then Henry Louis Gates would have been fine. His neighbors would know who he was. They could tell one black man from another, and it's his house, and the police would get out of his way when he'd proven it was his house, but they're not. They're entangled. They're entangled concepts. All right, last part. We're talking about isolation and abuse. I'm going to try and link you a couple of good YouTube essays about how abusers isolate their victims, and how that is a benefit for cult movements. And they'll say it better. One of them is going to be Ian Danskin. The other is going to be one of the various atheist podcast people who are out there in the world. Right. So the domestic abuser, the very first thing that they do is they start to cut their victim off from their family and from their friends, from anyone who can tell the victim what they're about to go through is abnormal, anyone who can offer them a way out of their situation. Okay. So the domestic abuser cuts off your mom. You're not permitted to call your mother anymore. Your mother's a kook. You can't talk to her. They cut off your sister. She's a lush. We don't get along. We always fight when she comes over. They cut off your friends. Where have you been? You were with another man, weren't you? Let me check your cell phone. They make it very difficult for you to spend any time with other people away from them. So the fascists, they have a similar program. The religious people, you find fellowship at the church. Everyone believes what you believe. They believe it fervently. You know all the words to the fight songs, when to stand and when to kneel and who to hate. And then you start going door to door, evangelizing, and people slam the door in your face. They hate you. They hate you. The Jehovah's Witnesses and the Southern Baptists and all of the evangelists are roundly hated by everyone who's not them because of their evangelism and the ridiculousness, the absurdity of the beliefs they're peddling. Well, when everybody hates you, the church has been telling you for years that everybody hates you. Everyone who's not in our church is an atheist, which is the same thing as a Satanist. And they don't like you because you are saved and they are not saved. It's not that they don't believe in God, it's that they hate God and they hate you. So you go around and knock on doors and get doors slammed in your face. You stand around protesting a thing and holding a sign and people spit on you. Where is there left for you to go except back into the arms of Mother Church? Back to the place where you know all of the words to the fight songs and when to stand and when to kneel. Everyone agrees with you. Everyone commiserates. They've been having the same shitty experiences, right? Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name. So you do. And the fascists are, by design or accident, it doesn't matter, doing the same thing. You get in those 4chan and 8chan kinds of spaces, maybe they're full of memes and you look at the meme and you chuckle because it means something to you. It's an inside joke. But you go and you post it on your Facebook or your Twitter or something, and the lefties attack, man. The lefties attack. Then you try and defend what ultimately is probably a pretty racist or sexist idea. It's not centrism or common sense. It's pro-gun violence, pro-lynching black people bullshit. You go and try and defend it and just get slammed even harder. Well, over time, the more that you post right-wing memes, the more of that content is likely to be deeply, deeply offensive and bothersome and just conflict engines. The more that your regular friends and family start to distance from you, they cut you off. They put you on silent mode. Then when you start posting on their social media, when you start commenting on their stuff, they just block you because you're an asshole. They might not even care about your politics. They care about your constant fighting, constantly starting shit, and the constant posting of racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic bullshit. And where else is there for you to go? The right-wing ideologues did not come into your house and tell you you can't talk to your wife anymore, you can't call your sister, you can't Facebook with your cousin. They did not do that. But they got you into an ideology that is so offensive to everybody else that the result is really the same. The result is the same. So we have this humiliated white middle class, unable to do the work of humility because everything seems like a threat. And they're isolated from everybody else. Even when they know that they're on the wrong side, what else are they going to do? What else are they going to do? That's fascism. This has been the Black Pill. You really shouldn't watch this shit, honestly. And I guess if you're here, I'll see you in the next video.